So I'll do a little bit of a demo this morning. So I'm going to carry on with this one, which was that picture. So I think a couple of weeks ago I just did a sketch a bit like that, so I sort of drew it out. And this will be acrylic. So basically I've made a start just kind of blocking colours in, so I'll basically carry on with that. So that's that bit. The other thing is, because I went off a bit early last week, so I'm quite happy to sort of stay a bit later, do sort of 15 minutes later if you want to today. So you're very welcome to stay a little bit longer if you want. What else? Oh yeah, the other thing I thought I'd talk about is just boards and prepping boards. So this was something that somebody asked me about in one of my other classes, so I thought, well, it's quite a useful thing to just mention, and maybe we have a little bit of a discussion about. So a lot of my paintings, including this one, are painted on just MDF board that I get from the wood yard, which is this sort of stuff. So I basically buy a big sheet, which is they come in like 4 foot by 8 foot sheets, or someone like B&Q's has some slightly smaller ones. And then I get the wood yard to cut it into a couple of pieces, and then I cut it down further. But if you did want to use this sort of board, they might be able to cut it a bit smaller for you. So I go to Southend Timber on Sutton Road, and that's quite good. So for these smaller paintings, I use this sort of size, which is 4mm, and you can get thinner. You can get 3mm as well, or 2mm, but that's quite a good size. And then for bigger boards, you know, this sort of size, I use, which is what this is, the drawing board there, I use 6mm thick, so it's just a little bit more rigid. And then what I then do is this is what they call gesso primer, acrylic gesso primer. So it's really like an acrylic paint, but it's got a tiny bit of something in it that gives it a little bit of texture, just a tiny bit of texture. So I get that from Jackson's online, but there are other shops that sell that. And I've also got this one, which is basically the same sort of thing, different make, Michael Harding make, and this is a grey one. So I quite often do the top coat in grey, or I'll mix a bit of the white and the grey together to give me a lighter grey. I quite like, I think the grey comes out a bit like that. This one I've just been starting to give it a first coat. Usually give it 2 or 3 coats, and I just sand the edges a little bit because they can be a bit rough. And that's basically kind of a nice, sometimes a nice smooth surface is quite nice. I know some of my students have complained that some of the boards you buy, it doesn't matter too much on a bigger scale, but sometimes the texture is a little bit rough and bobbly, so sometimes, yeah, so it's worth looking around for, sometimes if you want a ready-made board, perhaps get a smoother one. This one is more expensive. This is I think it's called Bella Arty. So I got that one from Jackson's, but they're more expensive, but they're a nice fine kind of cotton. And it's quite a nice surface because it's just enough to hold the paint. Sometimes they're very smooth, can be, you know, the paint almost skids off. But sometimes a tiny bit of texture is quite nice. It's also quite nice for softening out your brushwork if you've got a subject like clouds or water where you don't want hard brush marks. So it just rather depends on the subject. But that's basically what I tend to use for my own paintings. I used to use hardboard, so that's absolutely fine, hardboard. I just find sometimes when they stack together, these bits pull off a little bit. It's a bit rough, but that hardboard's fine. There's quite a few artists just use hardboard. That's what I started off using when I was sort of about 10 or 12, or whatever. For quick demos, I just use any old bits of cardboard. So that might be the back of a sketchbook. So old sketchbooks, anything that's sort of rigid card. Mount board can work quite well. Some picture frame shops will sell kind of offcuts of mount boards, like when they cut the middle of a mount out, sometimes they don't want that bit anymore, so they might sell those off. So sometimes it's worth, look, if you just want to practice and things like that, or not too worried about what surface you're working on. So for demos, I work on anything I get my hands on, and I'll just paint over them again after the through. Until they get too thick and knobbly to get paint on evenly. So that's basically the other thing that I have occasionally done, I don't do much of this, is actually add a texture to a board. So that's a bit of MDF. And then I think I've got some paint on, then I had some muslin lying around, so I just put the muslin on. And then another coat of paint. So that's really creating my own slightly textured board. So that's a bit like the ones you could buy.
So it gives it canvas effect.
Yeah, it gives it the canvas effect. Yeah, because that's basically what you're buying with these are either a piece of cardboard or a piece of hardboard with a little bit of a canvas or cotton or something like that. So if you wanted to, I mean, it's a bit of a faff doing it, but it's, if you're preparing boards anyway. The other thing, if you want, if I get any old bits of linen, like old tea towels or old shirts that have fallen out, you've then got that nice linen texture. So I use that and stick that to the board. Because linen's got quite a distinct sort of, some threads are slightly thicker than others, and it makes it look nice and expensive and like you spent a fortune on Belgian linen.
Especially if you're using up your linen shirts.
Well, this is it. Well, my son chucked out a shirt the other day that was going to go in the rag bag, so I can turn it into a painting board. So I'm occasionally done that.
Where's that?
Recycling.
No, they're out for recycling. Actually, rescue it out the recycling bin. So anyway, that's a little bit on board if you're into preparing your own. I mean, the easiest is literally just find some bits of cardboard, and really you don't have to use the. I mean, for years I just used emulsion paint or anything that was lying around. So because my paintings I now try and sell them here and there, I do use the gesso, which is what's intended for priming. But I think emulsion paint is fine for just trying things out, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's that. Yeah, just do a little bit more of this. Really, so the picture was that one, and that was the demo from last week. You saw me work that one up. So it's really working background to foreground, and I quite like to just get a layer of paint down first. So I'm not going to worry too much. I just work my way through these flowers. Got some yellows and oranges. You might work the whole thing in one layer, or it might be that some of this layer, I might do another layer on the top, but some of this layer might show through. And I quite like paintings where you've got some of the under layers playing a part in the top layer. I just think it makes it more interesting painting that way. So it could be that if I just put some yellows across here, some of those might show through to the final layer. And I've also got an orange here, so that's probably a little bit too bright. Let me just turn that down with a little bit of raw sienna, just to give me just slightly yellow, a bit more naturalistic, just a few almost like shadow tones. I quite like this subject because it's quite almost lends itself to an impressionistic interpretation. It's hard to see, exact, whole flower forms there, but you've got the impression of. So this was a photo I took in Lee Library Gardens many years ago. So that could be that layer, and then I'll put some creams in as well. So mostly white. And I'll just use, again, the tiniest bit of raw sienna or something like that, just to make that a little bit, maybe a tiny bit yellow too. Just make a sort of creamy colour. And just trying to keep the brushwork fairly lively and so that's the cream, and maybe just a few dots of white just to animate that surface really. Then the last layer is a green. I've got a little bit of green mixed here anyway, so I'm just adding to it with some, I think it's a cadmium yellow and a tiny bit of the cerulean, and a tiny bit of ultramarine as well. Just mixing a slightly darker green in there too. And really just try and alternate the brushwork a little bit. Keep the impression of odd bits of green poking through. So, I'm fairly happy with that. That's kind of got that, I could carry that on through. But that would be the first stage, and then going back to the next stage would be things like perhaps lightening up some of these textures up here. The second stage, which is really a sort of grey colour, maybe a little bit of red in with it. A bit too bright. A little bit of a dry brush texture to try and dry brush mark rather, just to try and suggest texture going on there without being too dominant. And then just a couple of distinct twigs and branches as well. Onto a smaller brush. Bring some branches through here. And a few lighter ones too. Just using the brush on its side just to suggest twigs and branches. Too solid. Yeah, so I'm basically trying to keep that going and perhaps bring some lights in here, lighten this up a little bit, and just give it another pass. Is that good? No? Yep. Any questions? Okay, great, thanks.